Yeah. Remove all the noise. Yeah. That's good. Yes, all the slides look good. Well, I think so. Let's do the panel. You see all the slides. Slideshow. No. Slideshow is like that. I don't know, mine is in French, so yeah, it's like that. Just to show it. Is that the one? No, no, not here. See? So it looks okay, yeah? Yeah. I'm sure that it's taken everything. Okay, thank you. And now we can do slideshow. Okay. So, clear. No guy. You mean that? present only.
Oui.
People online. I'm not sure if we can see.
Oh, yeah.
Who is online? I see few people.
Yeah, these are people online.
Okay.
AJ, what is this one? This is your thing?
Yeah. Few people online. And it's okay. So let's go. Go.
Anyone else?
I don't think so. Not from me, so I think.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the weekly seminar, research seminar organized by the university on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the university. So I'd like to welcome the usual, sorry. So I welcome the usual participants, which I see very regularly from the university, as well as participants from outside. We have a few coming from outside, from the ministry as well, and our colleague. Welcome to the seminar. Well, today our seminar will be about island ecosystem, island biology, and it will be presented by Dr. Gerard Rocamora, which you all know here. Anybody who doesn't know him? Okay, you all know him. Okay. So the title of the presentation is Restoring Islands to Save Species. It's a long title, but you can just remember this way. And then the other will just flow. And as you know, islands are tiny. They only represent about 5% of the total land mass on Earth. And yet, islands contain about 20% of the world biodiversity. So it's very, very significant. But islands being specific, being surrounded by water and not connected by land, proper land mass, face a lot of threats, as you all know. And up to 85% of extinction of invertebrates have occurred on islands in the past, and it's still happening at a very, very fast rate, especially with climate change, global warming, sea level rise. It's going to be even worse in the coming future. Well, Seychelles, up to 25 islands have been restored up to now, which means about 50 alien invasive species have been removed or eradicated on those islands, and up to about 40 new endemic species or endemic species that existed have been enhanced or introduced on those islands. These are very, very important in order to save our endemic species, and it's one of the most commended activity by the Ministry of Environment to external stakeholders. Dr. Rocamora, as you all know, has a PhD in agronomy at the University of Montpellier in France. He has a lot of experience in working on island restorations, endemic species, invasive species, and he has a special interest in working with rodents, especially controlling and eradicating rodents in Seychelles. Dr. Rocamora has worked for very renowned international organizations such as BirdLife International, IUCN, Conservation International, and he has also worked as a consultant in the Ministry of Environment for many, many years, I think since 1985.
Yeah, 95.
1995, he's been working with the ministry, and initially he worked as an ornithology, working with birds, and eventually has diversified his interest to cover general aspect of islands. Okay, Dr. Rocamora is a Seychellois now. He has been naturalized, and he's a proud Seychellois. But he originally comes from Spain or France? Catalonia. Somewhere in Spain and France. Okay, so without further ado, I will allow Dr. Rocamora to start his presentation. And I think you have 1 hour maximum for the presentation and 30 minutes for interactions afterwards. Thank you.
It will be quicker than that. Thank you, Joseph. We'll actually try to go quickly over these slides, and if you have questions, you can you can ask me later. I started with this presentation some time ago called Restoring Islands to Save Species, which is the title of the chapter number 2 of this book, and then said, oh yeah, but it's not just only this, and then recreate wildlife sanctuaries. And lately, I mean, I was asked to do a presentation about the importance also of rodent eradication to reef recovery. So the title has become longer. So I think now it has reached its maximum length. So first of all, let me introduce you the Island Biodiversity Conservation Center, which is a small center that we started about 10 years ago. In fact, the IBC, the NGO associated to, IBC is an NGO associated to the university. We started in 2014, almost 10 years. And Paul, you were our first treasurer. And the center was launched in January 2016, about a year after, so that it gave us time to finish this book and to do a few more things, to organize things, about the logistics, etc. We are part of the BDCA Research Unit in Australia. We are hosted but not financed by BDCA. That means we are independent, like the Confucius Institute or any other organization linked to the university, and we are a small core of resident conservationists. More than half a dozen, plus associated foreign researchers that contribute voluntarily. We usually have a few staff only. I've had more than 4. And regarding our achievements so far, I'm very interested to know that we have contributed more than 60 scientific publications, which first with an author affiliated to IBC UNICEF, and contributed to the description of 6 new endemic plant species for Seychelles, estimated Santerre. Attended 15 international conferences, and produced the book which I already is featured here on this poster, as I've already mentioned. So I'm going to go quickly over background information about Seychelles and the islands. Then we'll look at the threats and impact to our biodiversity, Seychelles biodiversity. This will only be an example from the Seychelles. I worked mainly in the Seychelles, but I also work on Mayotte and a few more places. A little bit in Europe recently. So what can we do to tackle all these threats? And then we look at how do we measure the changes that occur after we use these kind of operations on islands, these restoration operations. And finally, the lessons learned and the challenges ahead. So as you all know, Seychelles is a microcontinent with about 50% of its land area that is protected, very high compared to big countries, for example, Madagascar. And we have about 30% of our EEZ that has some kind of protection, not full protection. This is only 10% unfortunately, but still what is required and has been achieved through the swap with the Paris Club. About 150 islands. In fact, we don't know how many islands we have. Our constitution says we have. There are 155 names in our constitution. So there are more than 150. But we need to put a number somewhere. So there are small islands that have no names. There are others that have names. But anyway, we have a lot of islands and a huge EEZ, which is about the size of almost 3 times France. So it's a very big economic zone. Biodiversity is unique. For some reason, I don't see the slide of Aldabra in the background. We have a lot of endemic species, about more than 80 species of plants. You can see Boissy form, which is now restricted to arid in its wild state. It's Sardinia, bright, and then we have landbirds, like magpie robin, the Fistelbach, rarest mammal in the world. We have less than 100 individuals that we know. And then seabird colonies, our food plots, and the economy is, as you know, dominated by tourism, which can be a problem at times, especially when we have pandemics like the COVID lately. And we have private islands with small luxury resorts. This is in Ireland, for example, and also in North Island, which are extremely partners when it comes to, first of all, the islands. Arid Island Nature Reserve, which belongs to Island Conservation Society, an NGO which I am one of the co-founders, and a nature reserve that was bought by the Cadbury family. And much of the financing of nature conservation depends on tourism revenue. So it is also makes also our nature conservation sector quite fragile. It's depending too much on this. So now, the threats are impacting biodiversity. First of all, the human impacts. There's been an ecological trauma since the humans arrived in Seychelles, because they brought with us some species, invasive species, such as rats, involuntarily. And these, they invaded almost all the islands that were inhabited. And then because it was wild rats and it was very difficult to live with rats, they brought cats with them, because when you have cats, at least around your house, you have less rats. But then these cats were also predating like the rats on the birds. So, and then lots of invasive plant species and creepers, etc. So there's a lot of threats, such as habitat destruction, degradation, recutting, structural agriculture, of course, new threats. I mean, in the last few decades, that have developed and become more and more apparent, like plastic pollution, overfishing as well, and of course, climatic change, coastal erosion, seawater, etc. Now, just keep in mind that what you see around you, the vegetation, is dominated at 70% by invasive species. Meaning that when people came to Seychelles, the Seychelles didn't look so green, they looked a bit more reddish, because we had species like capucin, wahoo, that were in the lower altitudes. Now they are over 500-600 meters. And now, but especially in the low altitudes, except near the coast, where you have few forests of tacamacas, damiers, some also except mid-altitude palm trees, endemic palm trees, we have 6 species. But apart from these few areas, such as the mangroves, there is a high domination of invasive plants. And there's been extinction of a few endemic species, that's the barriers that we have on Marian Seaway. And you can still see it, but there, in staff specimens in the Museum of Paris, Cambridge, London, etc. So, as Joseph said in his introduction, islands represent about 5% of the total area on Earth and 20% of biodiversity. So about 70%, 35% of the extinctions of birds, mammals, amphibians, etc. are occurred on islands. And these extinction, 6% have due to invasive species, that's many rats and cats. So this is a lot, they've suffered a lot, they are fragile and vulnerable. And nowadays we have over 40% of all the threatened species around the planet that are concentrated in the island species. In Seychelles, we have about 60 invasive plants and animals that have confirmed high negative impact on biodiversity, and this includes tiger mosquito. And then I had it twice, where we survived the third infection. We have 4 all types of dengue in Seychelles now. And you can be immunized to one of the others. So here, an example also of the problems that increase in agriculture is papaya milkweed. And the rats created a lot of problems for agriculture, for infrastructure, for wireless, and also to the environment and to the tourism industry. In small islands, where rats have nowhere else to go, they have no predators. So every 2 months you have a new generation. And very quickly, you will have densities of over 100 rats per hectare. It's huge. Haven't really, have any kind of, apart from the diseases, the health risk, you cannot have a decent tourism activity with rats running around, etc. So that explains why some islands, private islands, have been interested with money to remove rats from these islands, and there's a common interest between conservationists and these private islands who want to do high-end tourism. Here it was 21 and 21 rats from my colleague, holding in his hand, out of 40 traps, 21 sides, 21 sides. So they were all full, and in one of these traps, there were 2 rats that entered at the same time. They immediately entered together and it closed. It gives you an idea, the pressure that the rats have. These rats here eating all sorts of damages to eggs, to chicks, to turtle hatchlings, tortoise hatchlings, and also to adults. This is something I will not have to detail today, but we know that they also catch adults at night, and they kill them when they eat them. So here are a few papers that have come out from Seychelles, colleagues from Seychelles Foundation about invasive rats on tropical islands, the response of black rats to evergreen and seasonally arid habitats on Aldabra, with densities that have been combined from around the world, that can go up to 120 rats per hectare. And in our book, up to almost 197 rats per hectare. That was a small island in Mayotte, where with my assistant we removed 117 rats over 0.6 hectares. That makes almost 100 rats per hectare. It's huge. So, of course, biodiversity, nature, cannot survive with all this. On Aldabra, it's less, fortunately, much less because it's a arid tropical climate. So we've been looking at the density of these rats with Henriette and other members of the IBC, La Misère, the extracting station in the Quadra, and doing some capture-recapture. Rats, capturing rats, marking them out, you just make a, with can be with scissors, it can be also with clipper, and you just make a mark. And the mark will stay there for several weeks and actually months. So it allows us with a system of marks, right shoulder, left shoulder, same left rear leg, right rear leg, upper back, lower back, and with all these combinations, make a system where we can mark 180 rats and recognize them individually. So, so the result of this is that we had at La Misère, where we still had, and still now a few are left, Seychelles white kite, which is an endemic bird that has disappeared from everywhere except on Martinique, except La Misère. And the reason is that there are quite few rats out there, 6.9 rats per hectare. And this we find it in both seasons, compared to the 100 and something that we have shown before. So what to do in front of these threats and the impact, is the impact of invasive species, particularly rats. So a number of organizations, and this started with NGO, started about, in fact, many years ago, 50 years ago and even more, to remove these invasive species. So they started restoration programs. They started to restore, at least to rehabilitate, because restore can mean that you want to recreate what existed in the past. And sometimes this is impossible. So very often we prefer the word of rehabilitation. We prefer to use that word. So what can we do? In certain areas, like La Misère I showed before, or here Saint-Anne, which has a peninsula where there is a hotel there, we can have grids with a system of bed stations with rodenticide that will control the rats. It will kill the rats. You know, it is something that they will eat it, it will go into their blood, and it is something that replaces vitamin K. And vitamin K is extremely important, is essential for both clothing. You know, so they have no vitamin K, they end up losing their blood, and they die. So it's not something that is supposed to be painful, they end up dying. And because they are quite intelligent, we have to do a system where they die after a few days. Otherwise, they will notice immediately and they will stop eating our bait. Okay, this is the principle of all rodenticides around the world. If you do rodenticide that kills the rats, like day after, they will associate. Calling it as they will stop eating, etc. So these are pictures from Saint-Anne. Actually, this is a picture from Saint-Anne, a small seagull colony at the back. And just to say that, for example, around this nest box in Harlem, my colleague over the 2 months, he shot 70 rats. Because the rats were attracted, they wanted to climb to go into the nest, eat the chicks. But with this nest box, the feeding them, and the mixed environment, we build it. We build with a lot. Is able to improve the breeding success of the species and participate to the recovery. And this is an image of the base station that I mentioned here. At the time, it was 135 base stations. And you can use rat traps also. What do you do with the rats? You need to sacrifice them, you need to know how to kill them. So, the title is very small here. The potential of small islands has been a problem. For the conservation of global biodiversity, why are small islands so important? Well, first of all, because they can serve as a refuge for species against invasive species. This has happened naturally. Seychelles warbler saved itself from extinction on Cousin, because Cousin was never colonized by bats. And we have other examples like this. But also they are interesting because there are concentration of marine wildlife on these islands, especially these islands, small islands that are rat-free. Concentration of international importance of birds, of marine turtles, in some countries, not here unfortunately, or not any longer, but some marine mammals, like seals. And then because of the small size, these small islands, they can be restored. You can change the vegetation, you can remove invasive species, you can put back species that used to be there. So they are manageable because of the small size. There was a motto that was used by Island Conservation. Island Conservation is an NGO from the US, present in Mexico, also in Canada, works a lot in the Pacific. It started more or less at the same time when we started it here, a bit before maybe, but without any link with Island Conservation Society, which we started with a few colleagues. And Island Conservation had a nice motto saying, for a campaign, in favor of protecting, to promote the protection of small islands. Small island, big difference. And that's exactly it. Small island, big difference. You can make a big difference at the level of biodiversity globally by restoring a small island. One, because you're going to be able to put animals that are very rare and have nowhere else to go. Which are animals? But for example, the Seychelles water, there were 29 individuals on cruising in 1969. For example, about 12 individuals that were left in the 1980s. There were no rats there. Seychelles wildlife also said there were few wildlife. There used to be some of the market, there are not disappeared, unfortunately. There was Conception, where there was no black rats. We used to have about 300 of them. Only in Conception, because it was the only animal where you had brown rats instead of black rats. Seychelles slowly disappeared everywhere, except on Cousin we had black islands. Seychelles is also mainly on Battery Islands, rising only in Battery Islands, etc. So, the interesting thing is that 90% of islands that qualify are important areas for seabirds are free of invasive predators. Basically like Andorra and the second one doesn't come to my mind, but have rats. The others have no rats. Important bird areas or seabirds. Okay. Important bird areas is an inventory. It's like key biodiversity areas, but it's for birds. And in fact, well before the key biodiversity areas, we started by defining around the world the important bird areas. I say we because I used to work for BirdLife. Actually, it's BirdLife International, who sent me to Seychelles. And seconded me to the Ministry of the Environment for 2 years and a half. So I met Joseph and the people there and started working on this rare and threatened species. So on this island, see here, all these islands have major seabird colonies are the area on this red square. And all the islands that have no rats are green. And you can see that there is a good coincidence between the two. Major seabird colonies, international importance. And then you have also some islands with no rats that had rats at some point. 30 years, about 30 years old, Bird Island. And hopefully I was only 5 years to brown rat, so it was eradicated. So, and finally, an interesting aspect about seabirds is that the seabirds, they go at sea and they can go extremely far. I don't have time today to talk to you about this, but the tropic bird can go 5,000 kilometers or 5,000 kilometers to the place where it breeds. We have, if you bring in Victoria, we have some breeding on St. Anne, on big, nice population on Aride and studying. So they feed at sea and they bring back, with their dejections, nutrients to the island. Also the fish that falls when they feed the chicks, and fish falls on the ground and so on. This needs a lot of nutrients. And we know now there has been some papers mainly by young Seychelles scientist who's about to defend a PhD in Hapu. So about the seabirds, the quantity, to quantify all these nutrients that are brought to islands by seabirds and how this improve, we'll see this later, marine life and surrounding coral reefs, etc. This is a new area of research. So how do we do this island restoration? Well, the first thing that we need to do is to remove these invasive predators and competitors like rats and bats. So it's the first most important step of ecosystem recovery. So with small islands, we can do it by hand, we can spread this rodentified bait, but with big islands, we use a helicopter and spread the bucket. So you need to be able to work with the helicopter can be just 1 meter over your head. And it's a lot of noise, very intense, but very, very nice after we'll see the results of all those operations. And we need to make sure that we don't leave any place without bait. Otherwise, if you have one female that is pregnant that survives, it will recognize the island and you will have lost your 100,000 euros or dollars. See? So it's really something that you cannot cut corners, you cannot let anything. You need to control as much as possible to go the safest, do always the safest way, and ensure that you put your bait that every single individual is at risk. I could talk to you for hours just on branch eradications. But so there are other type of eradications that have been undertaken in Seychelles, carrots, crescent-tree lizard, attempts to remove like headed antennae, barnhounds also, goats on Aldabra, Indian miners. These are species that affect our native biodiversity. And in this paper that we published in 2015, we compiled data on 74 eradication attempts of 8 species, introduced mammals, on 45 islands on the region, Western Indian Ocean. So that's the region. So that was mainly for black rats, for cats, for brown rats, and for mice. But there's been also goats. Now, if we look at worldwide, we have more than 1,500 eradications that have happened. And there are 90 countries from 7 countries, including Seychelles, that represent 10% of the world eradication attempts. So here are the countries, and here is our little Seychelles. And these countries, they total for 80% of the world eradication. There's an error here. These 8 countries, they represent 80% of the eradication that have taken place. And all these dots represent all these eradications that happen around the world. This is a database that is managed by Island Conservation, NGO, in the US actually. And here you can see that in the last decade, the number of eradications has really increased a lot, tremendously, because you can see that it works. It all started in New Zealand, especially with new techniques to remove rats. Now, if we look at Seychelles, and these are things that I explained in this book in chapter 2, called exactly Restoring Biodiversity Species Cycle of Vegetation, you'll see that Seychelles is the 4th country around the world for the number of species that it has been managed to eradicate from islands. Just a lot. Australia, New Zealand, USA are ahead of us. When we look here on all these species that have been eradicated, it's threatening parakeet, these are black rat, as I said, in the north. You can see that sometimes it does work in green, and sometimes it doesn't. But failed attempts. And look at the house fires. There were 2 attempts that succeeded and 4 that failed. So some species are more difficult than others to eradicate. Same with the miners. So on total, we're talking about 15 wild species plus feral domestic cattle, feral domestic pigs that were eliminated. In total, 52 vertebrate populations were eradicated from islands of more than 10 hectares in Seychelles. It would be more if we had the little tiny islets of 1 or 2 hectares, like Ilora. We need to check now. I removed this right from this island in 2002. I think it hasn't been reinvaded. So that's quite a lot. So mainly mammals, 2/3 of eradications, and so mammals, baby mammals, 1/3 birds, reptile, very little, tiny one. It's only crescent-tree lizard from Sentai. The last one was captured, I think, in 2014. And this is something where started by the Minister of Environment, and I finished it, by encouraging the staff to report them and to catch them, then we'll be given. If we look at Seychelles, I said we were the seventh country, but if we look at the territories separately, you know, if we separate Guam and all these former colonies from these powers like the USA or France or Britain, we are the fifth actually territory, island territory, for the number of eradication of vertebrates on islands. And if we look only at the tropical islands, with the third country in the world, for our number of vertebrate eradication on islands, on tropical islands. So when I saw that, I thought, wow, that's amazing. So I was looking at this world database, and this prompted me to do something a bit more extensive, as we were planning to do in the Ministry of Environment and the project of Vegetation Unit, a publication for the general public, when I saw this result, nous besoin mettre une TCCL devant. À cause si pas numérique quelque. So we have done quite a lot in Seychelles. I think we can be collectively quite proud of what we've done. And here you can see a number of papers that appear in the proceedings of the Island Invasive Conference in 2017 up in Scotland, in Derby. So this is a sort of updated results on this chapter, on this paper that I produced, and followed by, from my side, 5 eradication, 3 species prevalence of the bird eradication. They did very well, as I both of that assumption and my really tough challenges to remove these so really, let's say, wonderful, extraordinary work. And then the conservation gains and misopportunities in another paper that I just did about rodent eradication in Seychelles. Now, the second step of island restoration, another very essential step, is the rehabilitation of vegetation. We usually do, well, as you may know, Seychelles has been planted in the 1930s and 1970s. There have been a lot of coconuts that were planted on islands of vegetation, native vegetation. And they were coconuts, which usually the coconuts naturally they are 10 meters from the beach crest, not more than that. Otherwise, beyond this, they get the competition, you know, from the local species, and they cannot grow. So they've been planted in a lot of places, and therefore you have coconuts, a lot of islands that have been planted, former coconut plantations, and you need to remove them. So that's one of the things that is being done. Also, plants like sisal that used to be planted to produce ropes. You know, every island almost has sisal. And anyway, all in all, there's been around 400 to 500 hectares that have been rehabilitated or vegetated in Seychelles. You know, which is quite significant, mainly on small islands, not only, also in islands like Maui Island. So before you can plant native species, you need first to remove invasive plants, invasive trees, mechanically, using machete, using machinery, and rebarking, etc. I mentioned the restoration of former plantations. This is a technique combining herbicide use and native tree plantation that was developed on Davos, and it has been published by Ryan Brandis, this experiment. And then parallelly, you have to multiply a lot of these native trees. And usually you do this in the island where you are conducting this restoration. Because otherwise you have to transport, you may transport invasive species, you have to transport the plants. So this is usually what is done. The mixture of bioinformally and the Seychelles Parks and Garden Authority have been doing this for a long time on Maui. And on the small island of Fregas, also in Juneau, there's a very good Kenyan team on Fregat in Juneau, also in Santana, Felicite. They've been multiplying all these native species so that they can be replanted. In some islands, big islands like Conan, then communities have been sometimes used. Ourselves, we've been planting trees at La Misère, for example, for the white tie, and we've been doing it with schools. You know, La Misère school. And this was on Pralin, Zervina, Henriette, and Trust, Restoration Action Association of Seychelles. And also not in respect, in that respect, we planted. Trees grow quickly in Seychelles. These trees that are more than 2 meters high, and they were planted, they were 1.3 meters, 2.5 years. They were 23 meters high. So they can go very fast. But when you decide which species you want to plant, you need to do it thinking about which species of animals you're going to transfer on this island, or the ones that are already present. What we usually do ourselves is that we try to put plants that will be disseminated by the little Seychelles white eye, which is an endangered species that was endangered now. It's still threatened, it's vulnerable. And he is a very good seed disperser. For example, this is what we didn't have like that at all. And we wrote a few plants and we asked them to multiply them. Then it was planted in certain areas. Now the God has to take it and it's everywhere. What did we do? What did they do? They did some of the work again, but not all. Much of it has been done by the water. Same with the giant tortoises. This is why we are introducing or reintroducing as a priority these two animals. One for the big six, to disperse the big six, and the second, the other one, the white eye, for the small six, what we have see, what the perfect, etc. Now, the species finally achieves translocation. So before we do translocation of the species, so again, why do we do that? And because the species was on this island, or even if it wasn't before, because we need to create habitat, suitable habitat for this species which no longer has, and they have nowhere else to go. Like robins, white eyes, warblers, because they cannot live with rats and cats. This is why we remove rats, cats, rest of the vegetation, then we bring them. But before we do that, we have a lot of work to do. Thorough research. That's all we need to do. Biological justification for this translocation. Look at the availability of suitable habitat at the destination island, the availability of food, insects, plants, etc. Availability of suitable sites for breeding, availability of stock also. Where are you going to get? What are you going to get? The animals you want to breed this new island. And then look at health consideration. So we look at reports like this one that was before we transferred to council. Following the guidelines of IUCN, there is a working group, I've been a member for many years, translocation working group for IUCN. This is the work that we did on the black parrots. This is something that I led, something is also led by the IBC, with the ICS, to prepare the transfer of black parrots from Pralin to Seychelles. So that was about 5 years ago. So to do that, we went and we looked at the different kinds of cavities that were available, compared, them with SIF, who worked with us beforehand. We worked together as a team. We looked at kind of cavities and also the type of vegetation that was there. To determine if there would be enough food year-round for the black parrot and enough cavities of good quality for them to breed. Because if the cavities are too open and they can get wet, when it rains, etc., of course, this decreases the breeding success. These are the cavities, for example, to look at the size, etc. So this was based on the sampling. And then using GIS and make a small model, the colleague had done a master on Pragen, and we came up with a quick model, conclusion that we could host at least 370 black parrots, on about 370 black parrots on seaboard. So this is the reason why we do all this work, all this preparation work. And in the case of the wildlife, for example, what we do is really measure the number of plots scattered around the island where we're going to measure the structure of the vegetation and also the abundance of number of the leaves. Which kind of species, and how rich in insects and fruits are these plants. And we have to measure all this. So this is not going into the detail, but each plot is divided into 25 plots, and you've seen people raising perch there, you've approximated many times. And we call 0 and there is no plant, but for each plant, 1, 2, 3, 4, the coverage is between 0 and 25%, and 5 to 50, 50, etc. And we give a numerical picture of the abundance of each plant. This also is something that we have for maybe 10 islands, and that we should valorize a bit better. Valorize better, not an English word. You understand what I mean? So what do we do then? We look at which are the dominant species of plants in the new island we're interested to bring our birds. We compare with the dominant species of plants in the islands where our birds that we want to participate are doing well. We compare this. And then we look at, the average number of age, the islands. And this is the average foliar volume. It's an index of foliar volume. Because of course, the foliar volume is important because our birds that are not the black parrot, of course, the birds like the white-eyed Seychelles warbler, they hunt insects. They are little insect hunters. So they will go, they will inspect the leaves, and they will find the insect, they will eat it. So you have to do the same, and you have to record which insects you have found, in which quantity. This is a lot of work. And this is the case of the insect I was just talking about, densities on the leaf. Then you have to look at the size of the leaves. You have to measure the leaves. So we've done it, that was a study, we've done it on Conception, we've done it on Terres, we've done it. So we have a database also of the average size of Catamarca leaves, for example. Okay? And then you compare the composition of different bird communities and different invertebrate communities. But it's interesting that look at how similar they are sometimes between islands. This is Grand Sœur, composition of invertebrate communities on Grand Sœur, and this is the composition of leaf communities, insects that live in leaves on North Island. There was already a good population when we took some birds to bring to Grand Sœur. It's quite similar, We call it categories of insects that are, each one has a color set. And then we use some models, simple models, such as this regression tree, to determine, to predict, it's like what we did with the black parrot, how many white eyes we could fit on a particular island, using a model that We built on Concepcion Island where we used to have. And then we capture our birds. We put them in what we call the helmet box. It's a place where you don't hear the noise of a helicopter, and we bring them by helicopter to the destination island. We put them in small cage for 24 hours maximum, like less than that, and we release them. So this has been done for the white-eye by our team, which is a species that we actually saved from extinction thanks to these transfers. That was started with the Ministry of Environment. At the time I was working there, and then with the Island Conservation Society, and finally with the IBC. It was done with the Seychelles microbial transfers. It was actually the second species before that time it was done. And also before with the Seychelles warbler, microbial translocated to. And you can recognize me here with 30 years less. I was much younger. And, but it's not, and then the Seychelles warbler, which was the first species that was translocated from Central Islands. And it's not just birds, it's also reptiles, like the Seychelles terrapins, that have been translocated. When I used to work at ICS, from Frégate to Aride, and before from Île Serfan-Maé to Île du Nord. Was done by boat and by helicopter. You all know, of course, the Seychelles terrapins. And again, here, there's been some modeling that has been done. There's been some preparation. There's been some studies, as usual. And pictures about the transfer from Frégate to Aride with the helicopter. These populations are doing well, particularly on Île du Nord, quite numerous there. Aride also, there's reproduction. And there's been, of course, also, that was the first species that was translocated, the Aldabra giant tortoises, to replace the giant tortoise that used to be here in the Eradicate Islands, and then go extinct or almost extinct by people that took them. In this table, you have a list of islands here, about a dozen islands, and a list of about 20 species that were translocated to these islands. So, on total, we have about more than 20 translocations of 13 species, birds and small reptiles. We didn't try also with a leaf insect, which didn't work. And then you have about the same quantity, or a bit more. It's increasing over the years. Recently, now, with some little small tortoises that were translocated to Aride, where we have done that with ICS. ICS helped with that in 2018 to reintroduce that species there. So how do we measure change? Quickly now. What happens on these ecosystems? Once we have done all this operation in this restoration operation, what happens to seabirds, land reptiles, invertebrates, vegetation? Well, first of all, sometimes we are able to set up, before these operations, some protocols, establish a baseline, but not always. Because this kind of monitoring is not a priority. Sometimes the decisions are taken very quickly, and sometimes it's so expensive to get to these islands that there is no funds to just go several years in a row to do these measurements. This is, for example, what now ICS is doing, taking baseline several years before eradication actually happens. So normally we only have 1 year, for example, of baseline, which is not enough. And then when we do not have scientific protocols for seabirds, landbirds, invertebrates, vegetation, this has been collected, for example, because of the Conceal, on Île du Nord, on Concepcion, before we remove rats. Then we have a period of wildlife observation. And we go to islands, we use the available time that we have, and we say, this species is developed or not, that. species may be new, etc. And when we have a concordance of observations, then we can still make up some conclusions about it. So, for example, with vegetation, can you believe that this forest that you have here is only 7 years old? And look at me, not just how handsome I was 10 years ago, but the size of these trees. You see the size of these trees, 7 years. We removed the rats in 2007, and here we are in 2014 taking this picture, and the trees are 10 meters. You know, 10 meters even over my head. Tell you why? Because the Bisonia grandis is a plant that grows very quickly. And we never had so many before because the rats were eating the seeds. We could find this picture I had taken before the rats were removed. And this was 7 years after the rats were removed. That's on an island of Concepcion. The same has been reported for Ilzoni, increase of Bisonia grandis, increase of palms, including increase of coconuts also, the germination of coconuts, because rats eat a lot of coconuts. On Cousin, you can see by yourself here, once it was planted as a coconut plantation, and then the coconuts were cut when Gerard Rocamora bought the island, thanks to the Cadbury family again, who provided 2/3 of the price of the purchase of the island. You know, the Cadbury family, the ones that produce chocolate in UK. They did not so much of Seychelles. And here you have how Cousin looks nowadays. You know. The vegetation native vegetation has spontaneously recovered, and there's been also some help by the Nature Seychelles, who represents Biodiversity International. And here is what happened to our little birds. Seychelles warblers, they had nowhere to go, they had no native vegetation left. They were surviving a few mangroves at the back of the island. And when the coconuts were cut and the native vegetation grew, in only 10 years, they went from 30 individuals to 300. And from there, they were taken to different islands. Ari first, we have now more than 2,000. Then Cousin, then Italy, then Fregat. This species, we will see, is no longer now threatened. Okay, so we do monitoring of the populations that we translocate. Here we have, for example, this is just white tongue, and this is part of the PhD of Erwin Arlier. She monitored, we all monitored, and she produced several scientific studies. And articles, what has happened to this translocated population. So all in all, we have 4 species that are really, that used to be endangered, globally endangered, and they went from critically endangered to endangered and vulnerable, and now the Seychelles warbler is near threatened. The Seychelles could be also, but we went from vulnerable to near threatened because of all this translocation. The vampire robin, now they are about 500 more than 5 islands from critical endangered, endangered, possibly will soon be vulnerable, and the Seychelles vampire will rotate from critical endangered to vulnerable. So this is a good example of what you can achieve for species that are rare and endangered by doing translocation, by doing island restoration. In terms of seabirds, we've seen that some seabirds are recolonized, like tropic birds. West Seychelles water, you can see what happened on Ile du Nord, after the eradication in 2005 that I led when I was working at ICS. Davos also, another eradication that took place in 2003. And nowadays, so look at the increase in the number of extinction forces. Nowadays, we have 2,500, 5 times countries that are left. Just to give you an idea of. So reptiles also can increase in numbers after eradication, even though sometimes during the eradication itself they increase by secondary poisonment. They eat insects. Insects don't mind, they are not affected by rodenticide. They have no blood, but the skins can be secondary poisons. And then now the invertebrates, they also benefit from these operations. 2 years after we did the rat eradication conception, we found Stylodonta dentata, an endemic snail of Seychelles, and also the giant millipedes. We thought we knew we had found old shells or old skeletons, but we thought these animals no longer existed, and we had been working with Joseph and other people in Switzerland for years of conception, and we had never seen a single one alive. So there was still some surviving in crevices that could, not be caught by the rats. All in all, the seabirds massively benefited with 23 population of 9 different species, including terrestrializations and all these different islands. Landbirds also mostly increased or even recolonized by themselves and the population after eradications. And if some declined originally, they recovered well beyond initial abundances. Same for reptiles that were either stable or increasing. They go from skins and provide invertebrates, as we have seen. They often recover millipedes, crabs, snails, beetles. So this kind of work is important because it helps you to promote, or it helps others around the world to do the same thing. And you say, look, this is what happens. So we, for example, contributed several papers about the gains obtained from island vertebrate extinction, particularly mammal eradication, and also for seabirds in particular. And the first one there is for all kinds of behavior. So the invertebrates, the small invertebrates is a bit different. Sometimes they can increase, such as spiders. You can see here the spiders, clearly increasing 1 year after the eradication. But sometimes they decrease. This is what happened when but we have only 1 year of baseline. We don't know what happened before baseline. Maybe before baseline it was fantastic. We don't know. But still we've seen that they were increasing. Then there was a peak at the end. We think that this may be because there were more birds, there were more skins, there were more large invertebrates, and the small invertebrates are the prey to all these animals. So we think that's maybe the reason why they decreased. So a lot of research to be done on this, and up to 25 islands are benefited from invasive species management and other restoration activities in Seychelles. Different type of management, some are private, some are NGOs, some are a combination of islands from the government or managed by parastatals like IDC and OSPG, with an NGO like ICS, but also GBI, volunteers. And finally, just to let you know that there's been recently a lot of research done on how seabirds can enhance coral reef productivity. I mentioned it before by Nick Graham and his team. And also how rat eradication, by allowing seabirds to recolonize islands, ultimately benefit also to the marine ecosystems, to the coral reefs. Seabirds boost coral reef resilience by Sandra Bentley et al. So the team of Nick Graham. And the last one there. So those of you like Murray who work on these aspects, marine aspects, we can find really interesting, influence from the activities that conduct restoration activities in the terrestrial ecosystems, and how it also improves the marine ecosystem. So, in fact, in one of these papers, they found that 50% higher total fish biomass on reefs that were next to seabed islands compared to reefs that were in islands where there were no seabirds or very few. And then also parrotfish and the devilfish, they grow much faster, 25% faster on islands that have seabirds nearby. That was a paper. Then they did also an experiment with coral bleaching, areas where they had been coral bleaching, and they replanted or restored the coral in places where there were seabird colonies and places where there were rats and there were no seabird colonies and there were no rats. And also the recovery was significantly quicker in islands without rats and with seabirds than in the islands with rats in. More years to recover. Interesting development, and this graph, work from Gerard Rocamora, very recent data, shows very well what happens when you have an island with rats. There's not much vegetation. They eat much of the insects and the vertebrates and everything, and there's no seabirds. Here, as soon as you have the seabirds and you have the rich life, then you have all the nutrients that benefit to the reefs and the marine life in general. And finally, the key lessons that we've learned with all this restoration. The first thing is that it's not the work of one particular organization or individual, or no. It is something that works thanks to partnership. Without partnership, you cannot achieve these operations. Because they are complex. You need people to understand what needs to be done, and you need people on the ground to implement this. So it's often a collaboration with 2, 3 or more organizations. Sometimes really a lot when it comes to when you work across different islands, because sometimes you have to do things across islands to make it profitable, to get down the expenses. And then the second point is the key role of biosecurity. It doesn't make sense to put so much money and effort to do this if you cannot then guarantee that rats are not going to be able to. But that once you need to put biosecurity measures, abatement measures. In the case of North Island, we agreed that they will use a trailer, a pest-proof trailer, because otherwise you would have had to build a pest-proof room, a security room, next to each of their 2 landing niches. So to avoid this, there was one pest-proof in the center of the island, and then the pest-proof trailer was going from one side to the other as the chill season, and it's still going as the season changes. So with unloading procedures from the boats, and most importantly, biosecurity procedures and checks at the island of departure. This is by far most important, and of course on the boat, planes, etc. But this is really the government must pay to all these islands. And this is why we need to have many of these islands that are restored. Because one day or another, the rats may come back to one of these islands. Like, we did in 2005 in Juno, there's still no rats. But there have been rats that have tried to come. There have been rats that have been seen on these islands. And it was, for example, one male rat, after 1 year, because they are very difficult to catch when they are alone. It's still there, after 1 year and a half, you don't see it as that. But if you have a pair, if you have a pregnant female, then it's a tragedy, and I will talk about it very soon. So this is all the work that needs to be done. And these are protocols that we have developed. We developed also on our island, and we put them annexed to that in one of the annexes of this book. And as I said, essential to work at the island of departure, also on the vehicle, the boats, many boats, trains also, etc. And on the arrival on the island, the loading and unloading and transportation procedures. Documents that have been done, and as an example of the dramatic consequences of the lack of biosecurity, I can show the situation of Concepcion, where we removed the rats in 2007. And in 2016, 9 years after, 17, 10 years after, we discovered that we had rats, black rats this time, because before we had brown rats, and that's why the white eyes used to survive. We removed these black rats, the population of white eyes increased from 170 to 330 significantly, because the brown rats were also eating salmon, but not all. And then we don't know why, possibly because some floated drifted. It's only 1.6 kilometers from this island. Possibly because there are some boats that anchor regularly themselves here, and if you have a rat on board and it's very hungry, it will just, if the sea is calm, go into the water, and even if there's no beach here, manage to climb up the rocks and to establish a population if it is the pregnant female. So our population of white eyes, our mother population of white eyes, unfortunately, was first decimated. And after 2-3 years, there was zero. So we lost all our white eyes. I can tell you that was a shock to us. But I was right. We've been spending 20 years to do all this work. And un grand merci, as we say, in Creole and French, that we had done these translocations before. In 2001, 2002, with the Ministry of Environment, 2007, with last year, all this white eyes, because otherwise there would be no white eyes, bearing in mind that the few ones that are surviving on Maya are going to be extinct very soon, because we know only a few. So it gives you an idea of the damage that can do these rats, and if these rats also invade another island that is now White Creek, they will do the same. Of course, you can react quicker. Because Concepcion was an abandoned island that was also part of the problem. We could have noticed earlier, then we could have removed the birds, maybe, But it is very difficult when you have rats that are colonizing an island to stop them. You need to wait until they have saturated the island and then you eradicate them again. This is what we plan to do, and we will bring back the white eyes to Concepcion. And so the challenge, yes, so that's actually one of the challenges ahead, but what we did when we no longer had Concepcion, so we used the total population of Interdisciplinary and Frégate and created a third population on transfer. Now we need to update this graph, but as you can see, in 2017 we had a rapid invasion in Concepcion, and our population of white eyes went down from 650 to 410 or something. And now we are back to the same number because the population have grown on Interdisciplinary. Frégate stabilized and even actually slightly decreased because for various reasons. It could be competition with the Seychelles warbler also, which is establishing itself against quite a number of species. Could be other reasons. But the answer is doing well. We have more than 100 birds there. So in total, we are back now to a situation where the white eyes are considered vulnerable, and it has 3 main islands, and we will probably bring it to another couple of islands hopefully soon. So, yeah, we need to be very careful about this, very security, look into other methods also to monitor and check when we have invasion of rats on island, the use of dogs, for example, and we have some colleagues that have been training some dogs for a few years now. So this is an area that we can explore. And finally, in this graph, you can see that there is still a lot of islands where we can remove rats from the Seychelles, particularly in the outer islands. And if we are using the techniques that we know work nowadays, we could go from the current 4%, which is rat-free area of Seychelles, to 15%. And if we, and when we will be able to remove the rats from Aldabra, since Aldabra is about a third of the area of the country, then we can go up to 50% or more of our territory free of rats. That would be pretty good. We will, of course, have some challenges on the mountains of Maya, the big islands, to create what we call mainland islands. This is what we need to do. We need to put base stations, as I showed at the beginning, like we haven't sent that, and we've had also this on Lavizia working for some time. This is another challenge. There are techniques that have been used in New Zealand, in Australia, in Hawaii, about predator fences. You could try this as well, but you need a lot of technicity, you need a lot of discipline. It's much more complicated than to prevent rats to colonize an island. And then I hope you learned something from this presentation. And thanks for the ones that are online as well. Is there any question that you like to answer about all these different types of work that we have been doing over the years? In fact, many of us, different organizations. Anyway, I mean, you are welcome always to ask this, and I'm sure you know about this book. In fact, we need to make a second edition, so it will take a bit of time. But hopefully, maybe next year or so, we'll try to do that. Oh, yes. Larry, sir?
Yeah, thanks for the talk, Gerard. That's a lot of work that you put in with your colleagues to eradicate invasive species and show the benefits for the environment. Obviously, this kind of stuff needs funding to do, and I was wondering if there had been any sort of report or analysis on the socio-economic benefits of the eradication of these alien species. So, for instance, fish grow more, fisheries make more money, feed more people, coral reefs are better, more tourism, ecotourism. Is there like has anyone quantified the economic benefit of this outside of just pure protection?
Yeah, there are very few of this. This has been done in, for example, in terms of benefits for agriculture, benefits for public health, for example, removing rats which carry leptospirosis, which carry hepatitis, etc. This is quite clearly been demonstrated, and there's been one or two papers, especially one by Bazet et al. In the 2000s, that has looked also in the environmental benefits. These benefits for agriculture, for health, but also for environment. But not necessarily, sorry, the economic aspect, but not necessarily on the social benefits. And I think it would be good to do it, to focus a bit more about this. Now, the aspect of the implications, I mean, the impact of coral reefs, this is quite new, so it doesn't mean that. But for example, we discussed at the moment after these papers from Jennifer Apple's PhD, when you see the importance and how well is the reef and the fish doing around these seabird colonies. And bearing in mind that some of these seabirds are really declining in danger. That gives also an incentive, and at least a point to say, well, rather than collecting the eggs and creating a problem for these populations to recover, because this has been a traditional activity in Seychelles for many years. Well, it's better to have a colony which also benefits, which are parfois, I mean, the environment, the fisheries, etc. Okay, I think that's all. And if you don't have any, sorry. Welcome.
IBA stands for what? IBA.
IBA?
Yes.
Important bird area. Yeah. It started with IBA, then there was plant, important plant areas. There were a few, but it all started with the birds. BirdLife International launched in the early 90s. So, for example, I did the inventory of IBAs for France. French call it ZICO, Zone Important pour la Conservation des Oiseaux. I was pleased when I came to Seychelles to see that Madagascar, they had done it, the ZICO program in Madagascar. And this was because the birds is easy, easy to see, it's a good example, and it starts like this. And now we work more with key areas, key biodiversity areas. And within the key area, you can have important bird areas, or areas important for plants, or others for other things. And the challenge also is to look at the key areas, or ideas at sea. There are also areas important for biodiversity at sea. I think this has been done, the KDH has been done, as part of the IUCN program. But at sea, there is still this challenge, and this is why we study seabirds, how they go, how do they feed, which area to depend. That would be the subject of my presentation. Actually, I did a small talk in school, marine science and water. Last month, about where in the movements and the areas where the white-tailed tropicals are, there's only a dozen, where we lie. And it's huge, and for 10 years we have. When you're on land and you talk about seabirds or turtles, it's a place you can protect, you can concentrate this, and make sure there's no pollution, there's no nothing. So we're talking about the ocean. These 12 animals from our that when the distribution was going from the African coast to almost the Indian Ocean, it was 5,000 kilometers wide and 3,000 kilometers of latitude, north and south. So these tropic birds are really happy, and I only took a sample of them to get to that. They actually because of erosion. And Chris here, with the zookeepers on bird, he came up with a simple conclusion by looking at where 50 of these kittens were going, the whole Indian Ocean. So, doesn't mean that it's everywhere important and we need to protect everything. Because there are areas in this huge ocean where they are really concentrated. But it's another type of problematic. You cannot protect everything and you have to work with policies. Regarding fishing, plastic pollution, etc.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation and also two key areas of concern. You mentioned biosecurity, which is very important because in the eradication process because measures are not very strict. You might have new risks, new threats that are coming into place. Yeah. With your very long history in this eradication, have you found in that kind of like setting that you are like dealing with a particular species in terms of eradication and then new ones are emerging? And what would be like some of the development channels through which this invasive, especially the new one, gets into the country?
So one thing is preventing new ones in the country, and this is a matter of customs, of protocols that the national, I mean, those that deal with that national security, now the National Ministry of Agriculture, because it was that national agency. This is one thing. And then the other thing is you remove one invasive species, but you open the door also for another invasive species to come. And this is what happened on Concepcion. We removed the brown rat, and then we had something even worse that came into the black rat. And it doesn't mean that we should have left the brown rats there. I don't believe that. Some people do believe this. I haven't yet written on it, I will, because there's no way you can stop. Because the black rat is in the trees, the brown rat is on the ground. So it can slow down its development, but it cannot stop it. And we should still have the black rats colonizing everything and eating everything on the trees and killing all our wildlife. Then we can take another, we will have time. This is one example. Sometimes we have islands where we remove the rats, and then we have the mice that are there and take over the island, because the mice stay, it's more difficult to remove. So, bird island, for example, they have a lot of mice, and the rats were taken out and the mice stayed. Then you need to look at the mice. So I don't know if you've answered your question, but
yeah, I get it. Then you just follow up also to get your input, since it deals with some kind of policy or notification about having 50% of the land as protected area. And this has been for quite some time. And I have that feeling that I think it's overdue to be revised, so for us to know if actually 50% of the land is under protection, because that may have about 227 kilometers square of application. But what is your reading about it? Do we need to really do some studies to really see if we actually have 50% as protected areas?
hello,